own livelihood.
What is democratic economics again?
It is what morality is. And morality is nothing more than that.
Yeah, and I think we should push for that kind of discussion. I mean, that's an interesting thesis there, right? That democratic economics is a moral thing, in which we talk about in our podcast.
I mean, that's the whole point of this, is that we put out propaganda in order to get people to start thinking and be more involved with the ideas that we have.
And to highlight the fact that what has been already historically shown to be so-called communism is not in fact communism. It's state, as you mentioned, capitalism, where the state controls the means of production. That is, how to produce, what to produce, when to produce it, what to do with the profits.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is that we have to distance ourselves from this state capitalism or neoliberal capitalism, where the wealthy have control of that, and say, no, we want actually democracy to be in the workplace. We consider democracy to be our highest principle. Okay, let's also put that in the workplace.
Yeah.
Logical, fair thing to do, and it aligns with morality.
Exactly. Capital is not just a thing, it's a social relation. It presumes, on the one hand, the owner of the money, and on the other hand, the worker, who is free in the double sense that he is rid of all his commodities, other than his only means of production, his own labor power. He has to commodify this himself. Commodification itself is a system-imposed necessity. It is not a choice. Commodity is the universe in which we integrate with each other.
Within this specific historical period.
Yeah, and let's not forget, that there's no such thing as morality in a vacuum. You're by yourself. There's no morality. Morality is what's social between us. It's, when I come to you, the other, that's when the moral relationship starts. That's where all relationships become moral. And that's why economics then is inherently moral, because, an economic relationship is a relationship. It's always between two people.
We could think also about, I think it's relevant to think about what Aristotle said about economics. I mean, the word economics comes from Aristotle's use of it. And for him, it was a relationship, a familiar relationship. The relationship at the home, at the household level, of how they kept their expenses. And the things that are involved with that. So maybe sometimes the sacrifices that are involved with that. But also in the basic interactions, right? The physical manifestations of our interactions with actual things that we use in our daily lives, and how that has to be handled. That is a relationship. That is a personal relationship. Automatically, morality is assumed with this. And the fact that we live in nowadays better than what it was in the past, but of course still a relationship that is in its very assumption, in its starting point, being a post-capitalist society, one of inferior and superior, automatically fairness is lost. And this question of morality has to be reinvigorated in our discourse about what economics is, to highlight that, whoa, it's unfair now and something has to change. And we see that something has to change, how horrible things are.
Exactly, this concept of change. I want to go back to the historical presuppositions that you mentioned, that it's very important, I think, also at our own historical consciousness. What do we have? The very idea that morality is a social relationship is so ubiquitous right now, because when Enlightenment started to be the common sense across Europe and then spread from there, it was based upon the separation of religion and morality. And this also was a simultaneous separation of morality from a thing to a social relation. This abstract separation necessarily took very concrete but particular and different forms in different places. But what is common to all of them is the separation of morality from an object to a social relationship. Yeah. Of course, there have been many rebellions throughout society. Class struggle is a historical fact. But the very consciousness in which we find our own class struggle in, that is something very specific that has to be defined on the very historical terms that we have been talking about.
Yeah, I have something to say about class struggle.
Yeah, no, I've been waiting to get in.
But you want to go?
Now you both have mentioned something that I wanted to talk about. It was just you mentioned economics. Going back to the original meaning from Aristotle, It was the home. It was how you did the home. And then you mentioned religion, the separation of religion and morality. And nowadays we see economics as its own religion, basically. So
Exactly.
we're sitting
Yeah,
there. We're sitting there. We've forgotten complete, down to earth relationship with your home or relationship with the people. Part of economics, and we see it on now as this thing that encompasses all of us, and over which we have no power.
And it overrides all other types of moralities that we might have had, that we still might have today. Religion, values that we see important, art, whatever. It overrides all of that, right?
I want to add to both of you that this comes in a fashion that is a very important lesson of psychoanalytics, as Zizek says. I don't know whether it comes from Freud or Lacan, but the concept of the return of the repressed. What Enlightenment has repressed became the very foundation on which it has come to found itself in contemporary times. The economics itself became the religion, as you said. But this was exactly what Enlightenment emerged as a reaction to. This was the concept that Enlightenment wanted to repress.
Right.
And now it's coming back.
But economics per se as the system, or the personal...
As our ideology. We moved from religion to economics. Okay. Economics became our way of explaining things. That morality became a social relationship.
It
was attached. It was always embedded in stuff. We believed in things or ideas. But right now, it's all about social relationships. And this has dialectical consequences. It's not necessarily bad or right. It's the way you utilize this, as does economics, in the form in which it emerged as a reaction to.
I actually want to put forward the thesis that economics has always been religion. And they've always been intrinsically tied, and this is why also morality is intrinsically tied to economics.
But can I ask you a question, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
If economics is religion, I'm curious how you would define religion.
I want to explain it. It's like if we go back to societies, more primitive societies, a lot of the ways food would be distributed or things would be distributed, it would be like a shaman who gets to decide certain things, or a shaman who shares certain knowledge, or shares the knowledge, the morality of do unto others and stuff like that. These are all economic sort of way of talking with people. It's not just like don't kill people, but it's also, give someone your bread, share your bread, share your homes and stuff like that. And so it's always been intrinsically tied to religion, and now the economics of nowadays has become one of these monolithic religions, these gigantic religions where it's detached from who you from the base things that you do every day. And just another piece of evidence, I mean, if you look at like Orthodox religions, like Brahmanism or Orthodox Judaism, like they have very specific rules of cleanliness, of how you do things with food and stuff like that. And those are all, again, economic rules. I mean,
they also narrow, with these rules, they also narrow the scope of their audience.
Yeah.
They're always tied to certain nations. But then you have the next step is if you like, in the idea of religion itself, that it moves, it transcends itself, and it increases its audience in the form of economics. It becomes more easily accessible, but of course at different costs.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you made me think about it, but I wanted to briefly go back to, we went far. I wanted to go back all the way back to where I mentioned about Hamburg and the history of Hamburg, and how there's this dialectic of class struggle, which is fascinating because it's still instantiating itself in our present day. I mean, we see its actions daily. I don't know if you heard a couple of weeks ago, the Spiel Budenplatz, one of the stages, was burned down. It's about 12 days ago.
I saw that yesterday. Who burned it down?
Well, no one knows. I haven't investigated on the streets. I'm on the streets often, I haven't asked around to see what's the story behind it. But from, I think it was the Zeit, reported maybe a week ago after the fire, that where the fire started wasn't a place where a fire ought to start. Therefore, there was an arsonist. And that's interesting because For St. Pauli, the Spielbudenplatz represents the encroachment of gentrification. I mean, it led to violent protests. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember December 2013, a group of anarchists, I coincidentally happened to be there when it happened, attacked the
Coincidentally,
David. Yeah. No, I wasn't involved.
We were there together.
I wasn't involved, although, you know. But no.
My hand was broken.
Yeah, they attacked the David Watch because they closed down the beloved Esso station, you know. The gas station, one of the busiest in Germany, that made a lot of money, but still wasn't enough for the developer who bought the area because they closed down the Esso station.
I used to go to that gas station when I lived in the Hafenstraße.
Yeah. But also, it allowed the developer, because he got the building condemned because he didn't upkeep with the maintenance, of course, part of the plan, to kick out the people that lived there. There's an apartment complex above the Esso gas station. But also, this row of bars that faced the Reeperbahn, the Reeperbahn, they were closed down as well. And this was
Molotov.
the Molotov being the most popular one, the Molotov bar. But all the other bars, which were loved in St. Pauli, because these were bars that allowed young and up-and-coming bands to play there. That's culture that St. Pauli cherishes. I mean, it's the idea that in St. Pauli, as an up-and-coming band, you have the opportunity to be someone. Why? Because they have the example of the most selling band, male band in the history of our contemporary day, the Beatles. They had this space to perform, and they became this great band. And so Hamburg really, other smaller, up-and-coming bands came out of Hamburg. And because they closed this, anyways, they attacked the police station, right? And this has historical roots going down to the history of Hamburg in its beginnings. I mean, the history of Hamburg is one that it starts off as a place for elites to trade and not even pay taxes to the emperor himself. It was a free imperial city. And from the very beginning, we have this long history of the guilds, the working classes and their guilds, and what they were able to do. It's funny because in the Rat House, in the city hall, you have the statues, and this was part of the examples of propaganda, 19th century propaganda. You have these statues of the Kaisers, the emperors, all the ones that didn't impose taxes on Hamburg, of course. Above them, you have statues. Actually, above them you have shields of the different heads of cities, and above them you have statues of the different guilds in Hamburg. And so the idea was, this was built in 1897. The idea was that now the guilds, the working classes in Hamburg, have the possibility to vote, to have democratic control, so-called democratic control. They could elect their own citizens to be representatives in the Rat House. Why? Well, this was the case for the last 30 years. They only allowed this to happen by 1867. Before that, it was total control of about 25 to 35...
A good book got published in Hamburg.
Sorry?
When a very good book got published in Hamburg.
About that?
Yeah, in 1867.
Ah, yeah, that's right. Isn't that funny? Yeah, it's a funny coincidence. And anyways, before they...
Just so everyone knows, that's Capital by Karl Marx. I mean, before they keep on going.
Yeah. That's a good coincidence. I didn't realize that. And only these 25 to 35 so-called Grand Burger families, the great citizen families, had control of Hamburg. This was a status during the Roman Empire that was given to people, to elites, that directly could speak with the emperor. These families have been in place here in Hamburg. They've been in power here in Hamburg for hundreds of years, at least 400 years. And we know actually some of them. We probably heard of one family's name. It's called the Warburg family. And of course, the Warburgs, the Warburgs, we pronounce it in English. I don't want to get into conspiracy theories because there's a lot of conspiracy theories that, use this figure to say, they control this and this. But if we look historically what some of their family members have done, it's pretty impressive in who they are. Most notably, one of the guys who created was one of the main minds to create the Federal Reserve System. Right. This is, of course, the conspirators. They take this and run with it. But it's interesting. Hamburg has one of the oldest banks in Europe. I actually have a student. I also teach English on the side. I have a student that he works for one of these oldest banks. It's called the what is it called? I have it on my phone. The Warburg Bank. And so to think about class struggle today and just in Hamburg is such a great example. I mean, we have this long history of elites and power and capital and wealth, and still it's very violent, aggressive form of working class resistance right here at the heart of capital. I think it's interesting. I'm interested to be in Hamburg at this very historical moment in
it's
time.
a good lesson to be here.
Yeah.
We have a nice opportunity, I think.
Yeah.
The accumulation of the capital, the concentration of capital is not just the increase in wealth, but it's also a change in the very social relationship which produces it. That's why so much accumulation is always accompanied by heavy class struggle and conflicts. This was a time of really big transformation going on in Europe. The emergence of Vienna, for example, as a cultural hub that came along with the class struggle going on there, the Austrian workers' class struggle. And the same process going on also in Germany, right? Right before Bismarck started to centralize capital and come up with what can be considered as the first form of welfare state in Europe.
As a way to tone down the heat he felt from below, from the working class.
That was already in itself a response to the economic crisis sweeping across Europe in 1870s. That produced Bismarck. Yeah.
What can you tell me about the German Revolution of 1914, was it?
1948, wasn't it?
It's the one going...
1914, I'm sorry.
During the First World War.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also tragic how that ended.
Yeah.
Simultaneous mutinies on part of the soldiers fighting for the German Empire, and worker collectives declaring autonomy in their workplaces.
I'm sorry, 1919. I think it lasted.
Yeah, it's kind of strange how we've forgotten that as a society, right?
Yeah.
Just how we've forgotten that the United States invaded Russia after the First World War.
Well, yeah, I think it was 11 countries or 9.
Yeah, let us remember, the first communist state in the world was found in 1917 in the Soviets around that time.
Yeah.
And the First World War, all these developments show you that it was indeed a class war across the globe.
Yeah. And then Bolsheviks took it over in the end and turned it into state capitalists, which we call communism after that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's an interesting short video by Chomsky about just the history of the word socialism, for example. And that's just an eye-opener to all these other systems that now we label as communism or this or that. And that's really a shame because, I mean, what communism is by words is way different than anything we saw historically.
No, we've come to full circle now, actually, onto the meaning of communism. That's how the conversation started. So I'm going to end it there. Bye, guys.